Oh, live.
We are live. Nick Stoller. Can you tell us how did you come to help create the Carmichael Show?
Jerrod, I cast Jerrod in Neighbors, the first Neighbors movie, and he and I really clicked kind of creatively. And over the course of, it's kind of after we had finished it, I asked Jerrod if he wanted, to develop a TV show together, and he was interested in that idea. And we both had similar, we both liked the same kinds of, comedies, stuff that was about kind of issues and had long scenes and whatnot. And so that's how we ended up doing it.
Nice. And how did that show come to be on NBC?
Well, he had a pilot presentation that he'd done like a year or two before I'd met him, and so it technically is like a revision of that presentation, which I wasn't a part of. But he'd always wanted to do, he has kind of a romance with NBC and the sitcoms of NBC, and so he wanted to do it there, and he also very early on wanted to do it as a multicam, which I wasn't sure about, and but what he showed me, and what the huge advantage of a multicam is you can have very long scenes, like a whole episode can be 2 or 3 scenes. And so that's a really kind of cool thing to get to write. But NBC, it was always, the presentation was for NBC, and he wanted to go to NBC with it. He felt like that was the right place for it.
Mm. You said you were reluctant at first for it to be a multicam sitcom. What was your reluctance in that regard?
I think most of the shows that I grew up with were multicams, and I love them, like whether it be Cheers or Murphy Brown or I watched a little bit of All in the Family, but it was like a lot of Cheers and Seinfeld, Friends, all those shows. But it's changed a lot, and I think that a lot of the newer multicams I just don't really click with because they tend to just be like set up joke. When you watch the old multicam sitcoms, they don't really have a lot of jokes. They're just funny situations, or their characters, or their characters speaking very honestly, but the characters have a funny way of kind of describing their lives, and so that ends up being the so that was what we kind of wanted to harken back to in this. But I had actually worked on a multicam and was bad at it because I'm actually not that good at writing jokes. Like, I'm good at writing fun characters and like trying to describe life in a weird way, but like writing jokes isn't necessarily what I'm great at. But Jerrod was like, that's exactly why I want to do this with you, because you're not good at writing multicam. You're good at kind of writing just natural dialogue, and a lot of the moments that are so funny in the Carmichael Show aren't jokes. They're just funny moments, and like very honest moments.
What's that like, sort of with the whole dynamic of the studio audience, and sort of them coming into maybe a show which is different to how the other multicam sitcoms are in sort of what they'd expect?
Yeah, I mean, you could feel as soon as we start in the pilot, we talk about politics and stuff, something that most sitcoms don't talk about, and you feel a huge relief in the audience that finally someone's doing that. And there's a whole bunch of kinds of jokes and things you can talk about and laughs you can get that you can't get in most shows because they don't tend to. It's always about like, my daughter's dating someone I don't like, it's like stuff like that, versus like what we try to have very small stories that are about like a fight over which presidential candidate you like, or a fight over like gun rights or whatever the thing is. I mean, that we rooted emotionally in what the characters are going through, but that would be like, those are the sorts of topics we would take. And I mean, I've just found, in the movies that I've made, and this is true of the Carmichael Show as well, that audiences are always smarter than we give them credit for. They're always going to laugh at something that's smart versus something that's, and you can, with a studio audience, you can get laughs off of jokes that are just silly. But it's important and not technically good. So it's important that the difference, but you get the huge laughs are often off things that are honest and deeply true, I find.
Do you think we're seeing less and less multi-camera sitcoms on TV these days? And there's definitely has been a move sort of against them by most networks, I'd say. There's a couple that don't. But do you think there's a value to multi-cam sitcoms today?
Yeah, I think there is. I think that if you use it the way the format is best used, which again, I think like we use it, there's no other format where you can have like a 10-minute scene that doesn't leave a location, like even movies, it's pretty hard to do that. Like, where you can just have 3 people talk or 2 people talking to each other for 10 minutes in the same location. And so like, that's the And that's the huge advantage of multicam. When you have a multicam that has like a scene that's 30 seconds, another scene that's 30 seconds, another scene that's 30 seconds, you might as well at that point just shoot it as a single cam, because you're not taking advantage of the format. And I think too that hearing the studio audience laugh, hearing the studio audience react, hearing the studio audience not like something that a character says makes a real visceral experience, and makes them, I think, often more laugh out loud funny when you're watching it at home. A good one is funnier often when you're watching it at home than than just a single cam sitcom, the single cam comedy.
Mm. You've talked a bit about some of the episodes or some of the issues the show tackles, and the show does tackle like quite a lot of issues. Like the past season, it tackled things like pornography addiction or pornography, the Bill Cosby scandal, and an episode you wrote where Donald Trump, one of the characters decided to vote for Donald Trump. Talk us through that Trump episode that you wrote and what it was like sort of approaching that episode.
What are Australians thinking about Trump?
I think people, it might not be too dissimilar how some people in America have taken it. But I think at first people weren't taking it particularly seriously. They thought it was a bit of a novelty thing. And now there's a bit of a disbelief, and like that this has become a thing, and that he's one of the final two and stuff like that. I don't think there are many Australians that think he'd make a good president, but maybe that's just the circles I'm in.
No, yeah. I don't think anyone does. I love politics. It's like my favorite thing is talking about politics, debating politics. It's kind of my version of sports. Like, my brother actually works for Bernie Sanders, ironically. But and my family, we like to have political debates, and so I just thought it'd be, this year I was like, it's an election season. We'd be remiss to not have an episode that deals with the election, that deals with a fight breaking out between the candidates. We didn't want to say one candidate was right or one candidate was wrong. I mean, I certainly have my own opinions about that, but that's not interesting. That just ends up being kind of, that's boring when you're just telling people what to think. What we wanted to do is just have the same political fight that every family has, no matter what country you're in. There's always two candidates, and there's always people fighting about it, and really kind of dig down into what that's really about, and the emotional thing that that's about. So yeah, and then we could also make a lot of Trump and Hillary Clinton jokes in the meantime.
When did you write that? Compared to when that episode aired.
We wrote it. I'm trying to remember when I wrote it. I probably wrote it in I wrote it with I want to say March, they shot it. It was the last episode we shot. So it wasn't far away from the June air. But it was before. It was like we knew that it was gonna air before the California primary. And that was important because we wanted Bernie Sanders to still be. It's about primaries, and we were voting for in a primary, and so that was important. But it was. I think I can't remember when. I want to say March sometime we finished writing it.
So with that time frame, you weren't too stressed about sort of Trump's still in the race. We heard all the candidates were mentioning. You were somewhat confident that it'd still be a relevant episode when it aired.
Yeah, because even if the primaries are over, it's still a choice between Trump and Clinton, So there's still the fight, and still if we, I think if we also knew we had to do it because before the election, I think if we did that episode after the election, then it would truly not be relevant, So we needed to do it before the election.
Yeah. And I guess with putting that episode together and the writers' room and stuff like that, were there any debates amongst the writers' staff as to how to approach that?
We had it's always about story. It's never, I've been asked if we had a lot of debates about the politics of it, and there's not really we're usually just approaching the story, and that's what the debates are about, is what would be the best story to tell. And so early on, it was just the very first idea that I had that I pitched to Jerrod was that Bobby, his brother, is an undecided voter, and that they're all trying to woo him to their side, And then we kind of were talking about it more, and it seemed funnier if Joe kind of met Trump and decided to vote for him, and that made Maxine flip out. And then we were trying to figure out how to heighten that, and then And so we added this proposal idea, and that the whole idea is that they've just gotten engaged and they can't tell anyone. And so that ended up being the whole kind of thing. But it was it kind of got rewritten a bunch of times. And the way the show works, we kind of rewrite it at the last minute. I mean, that's kind of also with multicam that ends up happening a lot. So like the proposal thing kind of got inserted at the last. Really well gave the episode its stakes.
Yeah. Do you have with the series and with approaching this, what are you trying to get out of an episode when you are going in the writer's room or when you're producing it or whatever? Like, what do you think is the main aim of this series?
Or the goal of this series?
Yeah, the goal of this series, yeah.
I think we're trying to become America's living room. Where the living room of comedy fans, of like, we want to try to capture the debate that is happening in everyone's house, because I don't think that show really exists, that's like, and so that's the thing is to try to have honest conversations about topics that everybody talks about and everyone's interested about, and get everyone's point of view on these different topics, and to tell stories that are certainly culturally relevant and but also like emotional, and that when you're watching it at home, I mean, the best way to describe it is like, my wife always describes watching the Carmichael Show as it's like very relaxing. Like it's it's like watching those sitcoms from the 80s and 90s where you're just like you laugh hard. It's like you get to see kind of your old friends, and it's also like about something, which is I think really important. Like, I remember when we pitched the show to NBC, I was like, there's no reason to make this if it's not really about something. There's so much stuff that's out there. Like, we don't want to make just some bland sitcom that can't really exist. And so we've tried to make something that's really about something that's, and that's about, where we are right now, politically and culturally, as well as where this family is.
It's interesting how you say like so relaxing, like in some ways, maybe the show's a relaxing way to sort of think about issues that are usually not relaxing issues for people to talk about and think through.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's a safe way to experience it. And there's so many people who've come up to me who've just been like, that's my family. Like, that's how my family fights. Or that topic was just as hard. Like I remember the transgendered episode. A lot of people were like, that's like, you guys like handle that really well, because it was also very honest. Like that episode I love just because the character, like Jerrod, doesn't know how to deal with it, which is, I feel like, the way a lot of us feel, but you don't feel like you could say it because you obviously I have, one has nothing but support. But you also are like, I don't understand it. I wish I understood it more. And so that ends it. We're just trying to get to the kind of honest conversation behind these topics versus doing the knee jerk, like, we're liberals, or knee jerk, we're conservatives, or whatever the thing is, but trying to get to something that's ultimately more human, which is the best comedies are always really human, and the more human you get, the more honest you get, the funnier the thing gets, So I think that's what we've been trying to do. And I think also being able to tell stories that are like get emotional and get a little bit dark also helps the comedy. I remember there was this episode, in the funeral episode, Jerrod keeps telling his dad to, like, why he's being a hypocrite to say nice things about his, father who's passed away. And his dad goes on a rant, a very kind of emotional rant, and it's very quiet, and the audience is like, what's happening? And then someone says a joke, and the joke was good, but it's, but it destroys just because the tension is so high. And so it's like, it's that kind of storytelling that's really fun to do.
What do you think the most important issue is, in your opinion, that the show's sort of addressed or taken on?
Probably porn addiction.
Okay.
yeah, I'm joking. I mean, I don't know if there's I don't think, like, in terms of importance. I mean, the thing that I'm really proud of with the show is that it's not like an issue we're like addressing, but it's kind of part of the show, is that it is about a working class family, which is just not on TV right now anywhere. And I think that that's a huge oversight. With most television shows are about people who are wealthy, most of them, and this is not that. This is a working class family, and I think that to me, it's like Roseanne, or like, you know, honestly, again, a lot of shows from a little while ago. And I think that just having that as the backdrop makes it kind of an interesting show, I think, especially for these times where there's so much income disparity.
Yeah. And is there a favorite sort of human moment from the series?
I'm trying to think. Like, I mean, there's so many. I really did love the proposal. Jerrod's proposal was so funny and like felt very true to him. How like, and to Maxine, how like unemotional it was. I mean, I love that moment I just said in the funeral episode where Jerrod and Joe kind of you know, confront each other about what to do, you know, about the funeral, about his father. That was very visceral and real, and I found it very touching and moving when I saw that. I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, I mean, each episode has something in it that I'm just like, oh, that was really kind of touching. But I think that funeral moment, you know, I think the moment there's a protest episode in the first season, so to speak, where Jerrod finally admits that he's like, you know, this thing that happened to him and how it kind of makes him angry, which I thought was a really kind of emotional. I mean, those are a few kind of things, yeah.
And the Trump episode was the first episode you wrote for the show, or at least were credited as writing, correct?
Yeah, I wrote the pilot with Jerrod and his buddies, and then this is the first one that I wrote since then.
Yeah, was it like getting like back into that sort of role, sort of like from the pilot all the way to the most recent episode, but like a big gap between, you know, drinks?
Yeah. It's you know, it's fun. I love writing with Jerrod. He's so funny, and we really collaborate well. I mean, I couldn't be around that much at the beginning of the second season because of Neighbors 2. I was shooting that in Atlanta, so I just wasn't around a lot for that reason. But I've been reading everything and giving notes and giving thoughts and talking to everyone on both the first season and second season. And so it wasn't like I wasn't involved. And even that one, it ends up, you know, the show ends up. First of all, Jerrod always does a pass, and then the room is constantly rewriting stuff. So even on that one, I wrote versions of that episode, but it ends up getting rewritten by the room, and it ends up getting rewritten by Jerrod, and it ends up being a big group effort anyway. Even that one. So I think most TV is very collaborative, and it's particularly true with the show.
Yeah, it's always interesting how sort of the crediting works for those shows because you have the writers' room working on all the episodes, I imagine.
And there's some episodes. It depends how much the story changes. If the story's in pretty good shape, then there'll be stuff that's left over from the first draft. If the story, you know, I think from my first draft of this, there was maybe like one line left over by the end. Like it was like, you know, it changes so many times. So
yeah, for sure. And do you have a favorite episode from the season, other than maybe the Trump one that you wrote?
Yeah, I did the Trump one. Trying to think. I mean, the Cosby episode is incredible. That episode, I think that's probably my favorite episode. That's one of my favorite episodes of TV ever, you know, and I can say that because I wasn't around for it. I wasn't around when they were writing it just because of Neighbors 2. But I love that episode. I think it's about so many interesting things, and it's also really sad at the end, but it's really funny, and you just can't believe what they're saying. And so, yeah, I think that episode.
Yeah. What's it like as like a comedy writer and as you know, a show starring Jerrod, who's a stand-up comedian, like to sort of tackle one like such a sort of like raw issue, such a recent issue as sort of one of the sort of heroes of stand-up comedies sort of fall?
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, like it was actually not that hard because he had a really strong point of view about Cosby. We were just like not sure if they were going to let us do it, but it was something even in the first season, even as we were working on the pilot, Jerrod was like, I want to do this. I want to like do a Cosby episode. And I was like, that'd be amazing. And then it became just a legal thing. Like, will we be allowed to? But it wasn't ever like, that was an episode where like, you know, there were certainly many drafts written, but from a very early stage, it was pretty much locked in what was going to happen in that episode.
Yeah, and that whole idea, and I think the episode's called Fallen Heroes, of sort of these, you know, you build people up, but then your perception of them change due to actions and things like that, and sort of having to come to terms with the idea of fallen heroes is pretty like an interesting thing to sort of be dealing with on a multicam sitcom.
they all used to do, when you think about the Norman Lear ones of the 70s, like they would deal with these sorts of kind of issues. It's kind of the best. It's a play. It's like a play every week where you get to talk about these things. And so yeah, it was really fun. It was really thrilling to watch the kind of reaction to it and to see how people enjoyed it and and whatnot. I think there's a real hunger for these sorts of conversations to be having, and it's great that we get to do it just because there's so much ripe comedy to be had. So yeah, but it was fun a lot. I was really proud of that episode.
Nick, let's quickly. I wouldn't mind asking you a question or two about the Muppets and you getting to be a big part of the Muppets coming back to TV. The Muppet movie is one of my favorite movies of all time. And what was it like to get to come back and sort of relaunch these characters into feature films after they've been off the big screen for decades?
Yeah. It was really exciting. I mean, it was a long process because it took a while to get it greenlit at Disney, but yeah, it was a thrill. I mean, I always call the Muppets the like gateway drug for comedy writers. It's like the first thing you see as a kid, and you're like, I want to do that. And then the Muppets lead to The Simpsons and leads to SNL Live and watching all that stuff. And so I love the Muppets, and to get to write for them. I remember when I sat down and wrote the character Kermit and got to write his dialogue for the first time. It was really exciting, and I was, it was a really fun, and I learned a lot too writing that movie. We wrote it. Jason Segel and I wrote the first one over 2 or 3 years, and and then James Bobin joined us for the last chunk of writing. He directed it, and then the second one, it was fun to get to write a genre Muppets picture, like a kind of capery picture, so that was really fun as well. But they're such classic characters that it was just exciting to get to write for them. And there was such excitement, especially in that first movie, just because people hadn't seen them in so long in that capacity, that we were just excited to get to relaunch them.
And some people got to see them for the first time, kids today.
Yeah, kids got to see them the first time, and it was, and there's nothing like them. It's like, when I watched my daughter playing with the Walter the Muppet doll, I got very excited. So yeah.
What was the funnest Muppet to write for?
I mean, I'm trying to think. Probably Gonzo.
Yeah.
I would say Gonzo, yeah. Who's your favorite Muppet?
As a kid, I loved Dr. Teeth. Yeah. But I really like Kermit now. Like, I feel like I thought Kermit was the main one. And Fozzie's great as stand-up comic bear. Like,
Fozzie's the hardest because you have to write these jokes. Again, I'm not good at writing those jokes, but I'm not good at writing jokes, but he tells proper Catskill jokes. And so he's weirdly the hardest, but the most satisfying. Like when you crack a Fozzie joke, it's like very exciting. So
you'd be perfect, Nick, because Fozzie's also not great at writing jokes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, he's good at writing jokes. They're just like puns. They're terrible puns.
Yeah. So no, but anyway, it's like that must have been so exciting, and to get to get into those characters. And what did you think when you were approaching the Muppets was the most important thing for you? In taking on these like characters of comedy.
We just didn't want to let down any Muppet fans, and we wanted to do the first couple movies justice and come out with a movie that was emotionally satisfying as well as funny. That was what Jason and I, as we started to work on it, we were like, we want this to be like an emotional experience for the audience, and and also reintroduce them to people who, or bring them back for fans, but also introduce them to kids and people who might not have seen them before, and it was definitely hard just to figure all of that out. We had to learn there are a lot of rules that the Muppets have that we didn't know about when we started. Like originally, Walter was a puppet, and Jason was his ventriloquist, and they had like an act on the Venice boardwalk where like he would like jump off his hand and do a whole thing. But they're like, no, the Muppets aren't. They're not like puppets. They're creatures. They're real. They're alive. And we were like, oh right, of course that makes sense. And so there were a lot of rules we had to learn as we revised it. But it was. I remember the funniest thing that happened is, and this is funny because I've been based on the political writing I've been doing now for the Carmichael Show, is in the first Muppet movie, we were like, what's the stupidest, most arch villain we could think of? And we thought of Tex Richmond, an oil guy, We were like, that has to be that literally there's oil under the studio. That seems like the stupidest thing we can think of, intentionally stupid. And then I saw on these conservative blogs, like, the liberal Muppet writers are trying to like say that oil is bad. And we were like, no, we're just like trying to like, so that was a really funny like overreaction.
And it must have been fun, right? You said Gonzo is your favorite. It must have been fun with David voicing Gonzo, the guy who did it in the Muppet movie and did it like back in the day.
It's crazy, yeah. Yeah, no, the whole process was really cool, and just to see how they all, just to go to those table reads and hear those voices for the first time, it was a real thrill.
Yeah, are we gonna see another Muppet movie, Nick?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. That's up to Disney. I don't know if I have one left in me. I wrote 2,
Okay.
but I'm sure there'll be versions of Muppets Forever. They're 2 classics. So.
Yeah. And there's like, yeah, it's almost like the first movie sort of getting the band back together mirrored the Muppet movie, and then Muppets Most Wanted sort of mirrored the Great Muppet Caper. It's almost like, like.
Yeah, it's really true. Yeah.
So we need a Muppets Take Manhattan.
I know, that's the next one.
They need to put on a Hamilton or something like that.
Right, exactly. That'd be funny.
Yeah. Anyway, Nick, with season 3 of the Carmichael Show, what are you looking forward to there?
I'm just excited to get to, and I think we're all excited to get to tell more of these stories, that we were telling in the first 2 seasons. We definitely want the characters to, I think it's going to be fun to see how Jerrod and Maxine like plan a wedding with all of the craziness of his family and what their attitudes are towards marriage. Seems really funny to us. And then I think that like the election, we're not coming back until we don't start airing again, I think, until the winter. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of weird stuff that happens between now and then that we're going to get to comment on. And then there's a whole bunch of subjects that we didn't get to fit into our first 2 seasons, and to get to talk about those will be really fun. So yeah, I'm really excited to get to do more.
Oh, that's good. Well, thanks so much for talking to us today, Nick. Thanks so much for talking to us about the Carmichael Show and comedy and issues and the Muppets.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and all the best for the Emmy Awards and for season 3 of the show.
Cool. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Bye.